Hello class, welcome back. We are now going to continue and complete lesson 10 as it relates to application of some of the principles we talked about in our last lecture. So moving forward, our first in-class exercise will be mapping the 5 terms of technical contract elements to legal elements. How do we go through that? Well, let's apply some of the material we've learned. So the scope is the written up offer by the client. And so the client will basically identify the services they'd like to have. And so we call that the offer. Now that's put into the RFP, which we'll refer to as a counter offer, the RFP being the request for proposal that's issued by the client. The next thing is that the professional services provider is going to write up a proposal. And the proposal is basically acceptance of those offers plus any other qualifications. So we map that over to acceptance. The next thing that happens is the signing of the contract, which is the same thing as an agreement. And we all hope and trust that the cost has been identified as the consideration in that contract. No need to quickly take notes on this because it's been included in this slide for you to see how those are mapped together. Let's look at some of the application homework. So you've had 3 questions. Of course, there was many more, but I'd like you to be able to see the questions as they apply to number 1, 2A, and 2B. Now, when I'm asking you for number 1, the standard of care, where is that found? I want you to identify the section and page number for adequate referencing. And you can see the quote where it's been provided for number 1, work described in words shall be applied to refer to such recognized standards. Work shall be performed with due diligence. In the Bellevue scope changes, we find again page and section number, and that the city may make changes, but the contractor's compensation shall be modified accordingly. These are just direct quotes. Where do we find them? And this is all I would like you to be able to do in your homework. Just extract where you'd find those aspects. And then also in the Bellevue contract, the termination language. Again, identified page 180, section 4.b, and it may be terminated by either party without cause upon 30 days. Now, in each case, you were asked to render an opinion whether it was standard or heightened. Now, with number 1, it's not heightened. Why is this not heightened? Well, it just says work shall be performed with due diligence. It means just make your best effort to get it done, and that you're to use recognized standards. That's okay. It's not your standard. It's recognized standards of a city, county, or state agency. So that's pretty standard. When we talk about scope changes, if the client is going to ask you to make changes and they're willing to modify the compensation to pay you appropriately, then we consider that reasonable and acceptable. If they ask you to perform work without getting paid, well, that's not reasonable. And then the last thing is the termination. While it sounds like it might be harsh, cancellation within 30 days, it works fairly for both sides. So then it is fair and reasonable. It's being evenly applied to either side. So let's pause here. I'd like to use a case study example of my own doing. I had a contract where I had 3 Canary Island palm trees on a rental property. I had planted 15 years prior. Now these palm trees had grown to a suitable level, and I hired a contractor to remove them, but he was going to pay me to remove them because he needed to install them. We negotiated a price of $1,700 each for a total of $5,400. I was thrilled to be able to see those palm trees that all I had to do was just water them for 15 years, and now I'm able to recoup my investment and a lot more. I'd also put in a schedule that he had to complete the work by, and if he didn't, I could go somewhere else to have the work done, which is something I was able to use to hold his feet to the fire. My challenge was I didn't pay attention to the terms and conditions. I did not talk about the backfill, the repair, and other elements. So when the contractor got into doing his work, and there's an actual picture of the palm tree, all set, nice to go, I had no idea that it was going to look like he threw a grenade in a hole and blew it up. And then when I saw that he had ripped through irrigation, as you can see in the photo, and then also started backfilling the hole with some of the tree branches and trimmings, I knew I was in deep trouble because this was going to be going through quite a bit of settlement. And so I had to deal with not having adequate terms and conditions. So why do we want to make sure we talk about these things? Is so we have scope, cost, schedule, and terms and conditions adequately covered for when you are in a contract. Class exercise number 2. If you've been asked to design a new engineering building on the Cal Poly Pomona campus, how would you define scope, cost, schedule, and contract terms and conditions? Well, we could go through that and we would have a class exercise to do this, but this is what it would look like as we populate data into the table. So the 10 takeaways from this lecture, as we talked about, the leadership development plan, you're not going to be tested on. Know the legal elements of the contract and the differences when we talk about features of a professional contract with scope, cost, schedule, terms and conditions. Distinguishing what's heightened versus ordinary, and then understanding just the technical contract processes as we did on our mapping diagram. And with that, we're concluding lesson number 10. Thank you.